As I think about this experience and how I've done things in the past, I think my shift went from this is my objective, how can I teach this, to these are my kids and how will they best learn this. And that was a big shift for me. I think that one of the most poignant things that I took away from my first designing session was getting to know my who. I know what good teaching looks like, and I know I feel like I'm a good teacher. Then I got to thinking that a lot of the fun things and the tasks that I was asking my kids to do, the reason that they were doing them was because I told them to. And the reason that I was asking them to do those things was to make myself feel better as a teacher, because good teachers do fun things like this. And it wasn't until I really got to know my students that I knew there needed to be a purpose and a meaning behind the work that I was asking them to do. So the first thing that I did the very next day was I asked each of my classes a little bit about them as learners and helped me get to know them better. So I just took these questions and I asked my class periods, and I used a little bit of a different process because I wasn't really sure how, really it was a time situation for me, how I was going to look at 150 some odd surveys. It's a lot to look at. So I had used this consensus type format before. So basically each student responded independently in their section of the consensus, and then they talked about it at their table and came to a consensus or an agreement on some things that really spoke about them as a group. And then from there, each table shared out, and I transcribed some of what they were saying onto chart paper. And then I had basically for each class period a summary of the characteristics that made up the learners in that class period. And so from there, I was able to design work that I knew they would have interest in, work that they would be motivated to do, work that they would find meaningful. So once I had this summary, this spec sheet for each class period, I identified some common qualities that I noticed from hearing all of my groups. And each class period identified things like group work, liking time to talk to their friends and work in groups. They identified that they like to have a choice in what they were writing, in the types of products that they did. They didn't want to always have to write a paper. They also said that they would like to share what they were writing. So from that, I identified some design qualities that I thought would lead the way for this unit that I was about to start for expository writing. And in that, the students were expected to create a piece of writing with an effective introduction and conclusion, with relevant facts and details, and it being multi-paragraph. So the design qualities that I focused on then were affiliation, time to work in a group and talk, novelty and variety, and choice. And then I also added, just as their teacher, affirmation. So I started the unit looking at the introduction, and I thought, what type, well, I guess I informally talked to my kids about what was, when they sat down to write, what was a big struggle for them initially. And many of them identified that they really didn't know how to start their story or how to start their paper. So I found through some resources these different types of introductions, and I thought, well, that would be a great way to include some choice. If I teach them and show them how to use these different types of introductions, then they would have those at their disposal to choose which one would best fit their writing. So we created these introduction flipbooks, and each student had one, and they put it in their writer's notebook, but it identifies the 4 different types: a funnel, a dramatic, a quotation, and a turnabout. And it gives a definition and then also an example of that type of introduction. So after we created these flipbooks, students worked in groups based on a topic that they chose. I just had several topic choices, and they chose a topic that they just wanted to write about. It was an informative paper, something that they were already familiar with. Because again, we were just practicing introductions, so that was the learning component. So they were in groups based on their topic, and then they had to create in groups an introduction, a funnel introduction, and a dramatic introduction, and a quotation and the turnabout based on their topic. So they had time to talk in their groups and work in groups on a part of their draft that they identified as being very difficult for them. So I gave them some choice in that as well, because they could choose the type of introduction they wrote. To assess their learning, I gave an introduction quiz, and I had some examples of the different types of introductions that I wrote, and they had to identify which type of introduction that was, just so I could assess if they understood those 4 types. So that led into, once I felt like, and I knew from my assessment that they understood writing an introduction, that led me into procedural writing. And I started with procedural writing because I knew that that was something they would already be familiar with. I knew that procedural writing, having taught 2nd grade before, was something that was definitely taught in that grade as well. So I knew that students would already be familiar with that type of writing. So knowing my who, and knowing that some of my students would be able to be pushed a little bit further, but some students would need some built-in protection because they weren't as confident writers. I varied the type of product that my class periods created. So I'm going to focus on my 1st and 8th period classes, because what I asked them to do was select a topic that they wanted to write their how-to or procedural essay about. So I gave them some choice in topic, but my criteria was that the topic had to be something that they didn't know how to do. And so they had to research by watching videos on YouTube, on Food Network, to learn more about that topic. And I modeled that in class. I gave an example of when I was cooking one time with my brother, the recipe called for chopped garlic, and I didn't know how to chop garlic. And so I very quickly got online and watched a YouTube video on how to do that and learned how to do that. And I showed the kids the chopped garlic video. So they were so excited and instantly started buzzing about what they wanted to learn how to do. And so I quickly partnered them up and grouped them up, and they had a really good talk and discussion about what they wanted to choose for their topic. Then, once they had decided on their topic, I gave them just a pre-writing sheet that had their topic at the top, and it had to have my approval. And I sent them home with this planning sheet. And what they were going to do with that is they needed to do their research, and they needed to watch their videos and start planning how they were going to share and teach someone else how to do this. Because their final product, not in addition to that procedural writing, was a how-to video that they would create. So the rest of their research was done at home. watching videos, learning how to do their thing, how to become experts on that. And they created video videos, and we uploaded them to SchoolTube, which was something that I had never done before, and it was quite an adventure learning how to convert all the videos to get them uploaded to SchoolTube. But then they were able to we watched all the videos in class and gave feedback on the videos just informally to the person that created the video. And then they took their video and they wrote their procedural essay. So I have a final copy of one of the procedural essays here was how to cut a pineapple. So when all that was over, I also, in addition to assessing their learning, I also wanted to assess their engagement. So I created just a very quick 5-point survey about just wanting to know their thoughts about this unit, what worked and what didn't. This being my first time, I didn't know. I wouldn't know that I wouldn't know really unless I asked them. So some things that they told me were, their favorite part was making the video, and the thing they liked least was writing the paper. And things they wanted to change were things about the video. Now that they had the experience doing it, how they would have done it a little bit differently. So overall, based on their feedback, I think it was a successful unit.